Boldwood presents Blood on the Sand, written by Michael Jecks and read by John Telfer. Chapter 1. English Channel, St. Griffiths, late September, 1346. Berenger Fripper wiped the salt spray from his face and kicked the writhing figure at his feet. "Get up, Clip. I've seen more manly turds in the midden. On your damned feet." "We'll all be killed, you mad bastard. Let me die in peace. Oh, my head's full of pain, man. You shouldn't have gone thieving then," Jack said unsympathetically, adding his own kick at the scrawny backside. "I was finding you food." "You were thieving for your own benefit," Berenger said. "You never complained when I brought you a squab or a barrel of ale. We never had to search for you before," Jack said. "If you was real comrades, you'd have helped me find a man," Clip said bitterly. Berenger was about to kick Clip again when a sudden roll made him grab a rope, his belly clenching with the need to vomit. "Cog," he thought with disgust. A leaking, rotten, stinking bucket. The air was fetid with the stench from the bilges. With every wave, she rolled like a sow in mud. They were bringing supplies to Villeneuve-la-Hardi, brave new town, the vast English encampment outside Calais. The last convoy had been attacked, so someone decided to install archers on this. It made Berenger wonder whether someone in his Vintaine had offended a lord or a vindictive official. They kept being given shit duties. A man slammed into him. "What shit?" he snarled. "I'm sorry," Pardoner said, his face blenched and greasy with nausea. "I didn't mean to do that again, and I'll pitch you into the sea." He shoved the recruit back to join the others emptying their bellies. If Berenger went too close, the smell would make him join them. At least the recruit, nicknamed the Earl because of his sophisticated manner, was unaffected. They were the scum of the army. Turf, named for his face while sailing. Horn, shaped like a drinking horn. Pardoner for his constant apologies. Wren, so small and dainty. St. Lawrence, who was too good and kind to be a soldier. All scum, all hopeless. But now all his Vintaine. What an army. The shipmaster bellowed, his voice clear, even over the howling, hissing wind, and a fresh bout of nausea burned deep in Berenger's guts as another man barged into him. "Watch out, Tyler!" Berenger snarled as the cog reared over a wall of water, hesitated at the summit, and then plunged sickeningly. Somehow it stopped at the trough, flinging him to the other side of the deck. The stench of vomit came to him, and he had to stare at the horizon as it rose and fell, the prow of the old cog gyrating. This work was shit. Standing on a lump of floating rottenness, waiting for the wave that would overwhelm them, or for the first of the attacks that must surely come, he felt as much use as a wax sword. There were 25 ships, the third convoy bringing fresh soldiers, food, clothing, and boots for the men besieging Calais. Berenger could see them now, a line of cogs and fishing boats, all rolling and pitching in the grey seas. He wondered how many were chucking their guts up on each, probably as many as here. John of Essex was up there at the prow, clinging to a rope and moving like a shipmaster born at the base of a mast. Gritting his teeth, Berenger made his way, in stages, to his side. "Hello, Fripp. Isn't this great?" Berenger stared ahead and felt his stomach lurch queasily. "Yes," he lied. "I've always wanted excitement. My father never travelled farther than 5 leagues from home. He was a tanner, and a good one. I could have followed him, but... Well, have you ever smelled the tanneries?" "Once smelled, never forgotten," Berenger said. "That's right. When you work with piss and dog shit for a while. Well, it didn't fill me with a longing to carry on working in the business. Then he died and my brother inherited. So I came here. I wanted adventure, excitement. I knew it would be different here." Berenger's mind had fixed on dog's turds. He swallowed his latest bout of nausea. Excitement? His latest recruit smiled like a fox, cunning but wary. "I want to make money. I'll be important. You watch. I could be a sentinel, a man-at-arms, even a knight." "Knight?" Berenger scoffed. "You think a tanner's son could win a knighthood?" "Others have. All I need do is show myself bold enough. I'll do it." Berenger wondered about that. The man had ambition, but ambition wasn't enough. John had a lot to live down already. Until recently, he had been a vintner, before falling from grace. If others had had their way, John would already be gracing the king's three-legged gallows outside Villeneuve-la-Hardi. "Perhaps you should keep quiet." "Why?" "You're guilty of riding out when ordered to remain with the army. You've lost your position. You'd be well advised to remain inconspicuous." "I wasn't riding for my own purse," John of Essex said, with the obstinate look Berenger was coming to recognise. "I thought I saw men in the farmstead, and I was right. They waylaid us." "So you were put under my charge, and we were all pushed here together." "That's hardly my fault." "You think? Someone took a dislike to you." "We rode to a hamlet, got attacked, and rode back. Why should someone want to punish me for that?" Berenger frowned, considering a ship on their right, a galley overhauling the rest of the convoy. At the prow was a man with long, mousy hair blowing in the breeze. "Who's that?" "Sir Peter of Bromley," John said. "He used to be Sir Pierre d'Agen, but fell out with the French. Something to do with the king taking his lands." Berenger watched the vessel rush forward. The galley was soon far beyond them, racing as though flying over the waves. "Genoese! Galleys to port!" At the shout, the ship came alive. Shipmen ran up ratlines to let out sail, while Berenger and John hurried to the rail. With a creaking of ropes and timbers, their passage grew more urgent. Men temporarily forgot the agonies of sickness as the ship strained like a greyhound at the leash, an old, arthritic greyhound. "Oh, God's bollocks!" Clip groaned. Berenger saw a galley ram a cog. Arrows flew, and there was a burst of flame as the galley fired a small gun. Amid thick, rolling smoke, Berenger saw shipmen thrown aside. One was flung into the sea. Then the galley reversed, and the cog immediately began to settle. Another galley crushed a fishing boat. The vessel collapsed like an eggshell. It was there one moment, and then the prow rose up to the sky while the rear was smashed aside, and in an instant both sank. The galley did not falter, but continued towards their own ship. "We are next," John said grimly. Chapter 2. Villeneuve-la-Hardi, outside Calais. "You look tired," Beatrice said. Archibald had slept poorly. Mares troubled him as he tossed and turned under his blanket. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. "It's Fripper's fault. He told me about ships coming to resupply the town. It made me think. Will you be safe if I go away for a few hours?" "I will see to my safety." "See to the boy as well, eh? I wouldn't wish the donkey to be harmed." "I will guard him too." "Good." He left and headed for Calais. The town was contained within a rectangle of walls. To the east, south, and west, the walls gave out onto scrubby land. The grey soil supported a variety of trees and shrubs, but near the walls the land was marshy. There was barely need to dig a moat, for no heavy equipment could stand on it, but there were moats too, curving from the east along the south and part-way up the western wall. Northeast was the river that fed the estuary. Here there was another moat and a long dike. Additional defences protected the castle to the northwest. Archibald sighed. It was tempting to think that he could pound the castle into dust, but, alas, it was impregnable, as were most of the town's walls. He might reach the town with powder and shot, but only at the last gasp. Old technology would serve better here, catapults and trebuchets. However, there was still work for his machines. This was what his dreams had told him. To the north, for example, was the Risbank. From there he would be able to command the entrance to the harbour. True, for now the Risbank was held by French defenders, but they could be driven off. It was a thought. Aye, it was a good thought. "They'll take us. We'll all be killed," Clip whined. "Shut up, Clip," Jack said. Dog breath glowered at the ship. "I'll not be caught by a pox Genoese son of a whore." "They won't take us while we remain here fighting," Berenger said. "Fripp, they're getting closer," Mark Tyler said. Berenger nodded. The sea obscured the chasing vessel for a moment, but then it reappeared, the prow seemingly pointing to the heavens as it breasted the wave, and then started the long, gut-churning, swooping dive. It was definitely pursuing them. "It's a galley, Tyler. What do you expect?" Tyler flicked lank hair from his brow. A tall fellow with dark eyes and a pale face. Berenger didn't trust him. Tyler had plundered a religious house. Berenger preferred to keep his enemies secular. He didn't want to provoke God himself. Eyes narrowed against the stinging spray, Berenger felt he had aged 10 years. "Bollocks! I've had enough of this shit," he swore, and made his way to the shipmaster. A sudden thunder as a fresh wave struck the hull, and Berenger was thrown from his feet. He slid over the tilting deck, almost slamming into the timbers on the farther side, but before he could, a hand grasped his jerkin. He shivered. He had almost been thrown from the ship. "Glad I'm here now, are you?" Tyler sneered. Berenger jerked himself free and hauled himself upright. "Keep off me!" "No gratitude, eh?" Tyler said. "No," Berenger said to himself. "No gratitude, no friendship, and no trust." Ed the donkey stood huddled in a cloak near Archibald's wagon, grumpily surveying the grey seas. 12 years old, Ed was orphaned when French pirates killed his parents. He came to France for revenge, but found death and hardship instead. All the soldiers avoided Archibald. They made signs against the devil on seeing him. He had found Archibald terrifying too. The man reeked of brimstone. But gradually Ed began to trust the old Genoese. He was honest and fair, and had protected Ed. It was not only Archibald who made him comfortable. It was also the constant presence of Beatrice. She felt like a mix of the older sister he'd never had, and his mother. Beatrice was beautiful and kind and understanding. He wished she truly was his sister. He adored her. There was a sound from the wagon. In the semi-darkness it was hard to see much, but he could see a sack moving. It was the bag in which they kept their store of oats. A dog? It was too large for a rat, surely. The animal must be bigger than a cat. He wouldn't want to confront a rat that size. He stood, shouted, and threw a rock. There was a yelp, but it wasn't canine. Ed found a small boy of 11 or so rubbing his head. He turned round, terrified, but when he saw Ed, he scowled. "Get off our food," Ed spat. "I'll take what I need," the boy responded truculently. "You'll have to fight me first. Think you can stop me?" Ed held his gaze. He had no desire to fight, but he would rather fight than see the Vintaine's food stolen by some thieving scrote. "Yes." The boy was painfully thin, as though he hadn't eaten in days. "You're French?" Ed demanded. With the condescension of an older boy for one a full year younger, Ed dismissed him as a threat. "Yes, this is my land," the boy declared. Ed shrugged. "But it's our food." "Still, if you're hungry, I have food." The boy eyed the hunk of bread Ed displayed with all the desperate attention of a cur. He stared at it, then up at Ed's face, as though believing there to be a trick in this proffered generosity. "I've been hungry too," Ed said by way of explanation. "Come, eat." "What is your name?" "Georges," his visitor said, edging nearer. "Where are you from?" "My family lived near here. You have destroyed it. We have nothing left, and I have lost my family." "I lost my family too," Ed said. He held the loaf higher, ducking his head. "Come, eat." The boy darted forward, snatched the bread and stuffed it into his mouth as quickly as he could, like a squirrel. "You want some drink?" Ed asked. Georges nodded, and Ed fetched a mazer of wine. The boy took it and drained it in one, coughing at its strength. Ed refilled it, and the boy sipped more carefully now. "You'll be safe here," Ed said. "The men looked after me, too." Georges watched him doubtfully, but slowly nodded. As if he had passed responsibility for his well-being to Ed, he wrapped himself up in Ed's blanket and was soon fast asleep. Bleeding Tyler. Every army held men like Tyler, the stranger at the outer fringes of the group, the man who held the secrets of his past close to his chest, the one whom none of the others trusted entirely. John of Essex was bad enough, but while dangerous, he was predictable. Tyler was different. All the men in Berenger's Vintaine had secrets. In King Edward's army, more than a few had been outlaws. There were draw-latches, robbers and murderers in every centaine, mingling freely with honest fighters who had been brought by their lords or tempted by the promise of booty. Some were pardoned felons. The king had need of men to swell ranks depleted by the short, vicious campaign that took the army to the walls of Paris and back to Calais, and he welcomed any man who could wield a sword or bow. For every reliable youth there was a man who was viewed askance by those who knew him. Tyler was one such. "You all right, Vintaine?" John of Essex called. Berenger grunted, his attention on the galley behind them. "Shipman, how long till we reach port?" he bellowed. The ship's master, a dour old fisherman with a round face framed by grey whiskers, curled his lip. "If it keeps on like that, I'll never reach port." Chapter 3. The English Channel. "They're preparing!" The call from the crow's nest came during a lull. Then the deck pitched and Fripper had to clutch a rope. On the galley, men were gathering at the forecastle. "Vintaine!" he yelled. "String your bows!" Usually, as the enemy approached, Berenger's blood coursed more slowly. His breath came more calmly. When he was younger, he had known only terror, heart beating faster, armpits and hands clammy, knowing he must chance his life again. But with age, that fear had dulled. Now there was only the acceptance of an undertaking, nothing more. It was a job. Not today. Fighting on ships was unnatural. A stab was one thing. Here, there was the risk of drowning. That thought terrified him and sucked at his will. Berenger had come to France to make money. His parents died when he was young, and the old king, Edward II, took him in. Growing in the court, shown how to behave, he loved the king like a father. But then the barons rose against Edward, and Berenger's life was turned topsy-turvy. Later, the king's son had shown an interest in him, and perhaps Berenger could have made something of his life, maybe even settled and raised a family. But instead, the lure of loot took hold of him. With no roots, no family, no land to hold him, he became a freebooter. If he survived this, if he came out whole after the siege of Calais, he would find a different life, no more war and bloodshed. With God's help, he would find a woman and settle. He had promised this many times before, but this time he would keep his word. That he swore. "Should we lose Fripp?" Clip's whining voice cut into his thoughts. "They'll kill us all." Berenger felt a shudder pass through his frame. A surge of anger at these Genoese, at France, and yes, at his king for sending him here, to this boat, to die. The spell of terror was broken. "Archers, draw! Archers, loose!" he bellowed and set his hand to his sword hilt. "I don't give a fuck who these arrogant bastards are. They won't take me without a fight." He could see them clearly. Burly fighting men burned by wind and sun, wearing a mixture of plain clothing and mail, some bearing helmets. Several bore axes and polearms, while more stood at the rail with swords. Aloft were bowmen, crossbows spanned and ready. 3 bolts slammed into the Vintaine. The sound, like gravel flung against wet cabbage, made Berenger's belly roll. He hated that sound above all others. "Get those bastards on the crow's nest!" he bawled, gripping his sword firmly. It was a poor way to fight, this, with hands cold and damp from spray. A sudden lurch and a splintering, crunching beneath his feet. The ship gave a shuddering roll, and then her rolling was stopped. But the deck remained at an impossible angle. Berenger clung to his rope, the loose end wrapped about his wrist, while his men slid along the deck. Clip grabbed a stanchion and gave his hand to John of Essex. Jack Fletcher was at the mast and managed to stop a sailor passing by on his back. All about the deck, sailors and warriors held on to each other and any spare ropes or stays, rather than fighting the ship. Bolts flew, and Berenger saw one pass through a sailor's body, while he shivered and cursed in pain. Another nicked Jack Fletcher's skull and stabbed the mast itself. He looked up at it with an expression of loathing mixed with rage. Dog Breath swung from a rope, cursing volubly in a snarling whine when a bolt almost struck his hip. Turf was curled into a ball at the whale. His hands clenched together as he prayed. A man with a grapnel stood at the front of the galley, and Berenger lifted his sword to rally his men. But before he could, a calm, accented voice cut through the creaking, crackling timbers. "English! Do you think to die today, or would you live?" a man called. The speaker was a swarthy, dark man with a well-trimmed beard and white teeth that stood in stark contrast to his greasy, almost black hair. His voice was grim, but his eyes alive with humour. "Come, English, there is no profit in killing you all. Surrender, and you will be saved. Your ship is sinking. Her hull is cracked like a dropped bowl. We could leave you to drown, but I don't think you would like to drown." Berenger gazed at the deck. 3 men dead, 2 from his Vintaine and 1 sailor. But as matters stood, the Genoese could pick them off without effort if they wanted, and there was nothing he or the archers could do. Only 4 still had bows. Their arrows were lost. With the deck angled as it was, they could not fight up the slippery slope. They would be slaughtered before they reached the whale. "Fripp!" Jack roared up at him. "In Christ's name! We can't fight!" "You have us," Berenger said to the smiling face. At that moment, he hated his captor. Chapter 4. Berenger stood on the galley's forecastle as the oars dipped into the water. The galley's master had not lied. The galley's spike had punctured the English vessel as easily as a knife slipping into an inflated bladder, and, like a bladder once stabbed, it was lost, slowly settling like a hound sprawling before a fire. Soon the deck was level with the waves, and then the water was crashing over and through her, and the masts leaned from the vertical until the cog rolled over and sank. A young shipman sobbed. Strange, Berenger thought, that men could become attached to an assemblage of cords, pegs, and wood. But he, too, had a sense of loss. Perhaps because the ship represented home. Losing her, he was as bereft as any of her sailors. "You are master of the ship?" the Genoese asked. "No, you killed the master, a crossbow bolt." "The fortune of war, eh? It is a shame. I will say prayers for him," the man said. He looked suitably solemn for a moment, but then a smile flashed, and he looked more like a pirate than a priest. "But first we bring you to firm ground again, yes? You would like that?" Berenger nodded. He had never enjoyed travelling on ships. They were essential, of course, but that didn't mean he had to enjoy them. For him, ships were unnatural. The sooner he was on land, the better. He would feel safer. Not that it would necessarily be true, he knew. The Genoese were in the pay of the French. They were mercenaries, he thought with disgust, available to any with a large purse. They had no sense of honour. "Your men, they are thirsty?" the Genoese asked. A shipman had been injured by a pair of bolts and sat panting at a companionway. That man is in pain. Drink would be received with gratitude, Berenger said, and grimaced. You are in pain? No, but I shall be. The French are not kind to captured prisoners, Berenger said. I will not have my prisoners assaulted needlessly, the Genoese said dismissively. Yes, for certain. I swear it, my friend. Come. The Genoese waved a hand expansively. My name is Chrétien de Grimaud. You are my guest and friend, and while you are aboard the Sainte Marie, you need not fear. My men will not harm you. When we deposit you on French soil, there will be a good bed and food. You will not be harmed. I swear this on my son's life. Berenger could not help but give a twisted smile as the Genoese bowed low and looked up at him, still bent, with a twinkling grin. I am grateful, master, for the honor you do us. How did you learn to speak English? Chrétien stood upright again. Ah, well, there are many English who still live with the Knights of Malta and who populate the worst harbors and ports. I have learned to enjoy the company of the English. Yet you take up arms with the French. Ah, my friend. Chrétien gave a shamefaced shake of his head. That is sad, but Genoa is allied to France, so when the French king asks for our help, we must assist him. He shrugged, and the piratical expression returned to his eyes, especially since he pays us 900 florins a month. His grin was infectious enough to make Berenger forget his misery for the present. That is better, my friend. I will have wine brought so we may seal our friendship. We are honorable combatants and should deal fairly with each other, no? Now, your name, I beg of you? I am Berenger Fripper. Berenger, but surely you are a knight with your warlike appearance and bold attire. Berenger felt his mouth fall open. No, I'm no knight, only a man-at-arms. You bear yourself well, my friend, but no matter. Wine! I will have wine here. Turning back to Berenger, he added more quietly, I managed to raid a storehouse before setting sail, and have some very excellent barrels that had been destined for a bishop. It would have been a waste to see such good wine sent to a religious gullet. Villeneuve-la-Hardi. He arrived as dusk was falling, a man of middling height with a round face and grey-blue eyes that sparkled. He was hooded and bent, walking like a man 20 years older. The vidame was used to concealment. Their meeting place was a grim little chamber off an alley in a suburb of the town. Old sacking mingled with refuse, with trash and broken spars and bits and pieces of old rope. A rat's corpse lay partially mummified beside a shred or two of rag. It was a shithole, basically. Not his first choice, but it served. What happened? He demanded. It wasn't my fault, the big man said. It's never your fault, is it, Bertuccat? He said. Not even when you go to a private assignation and get into a fight. An English archer was listening, one who serves with Berenger Fripper, the one they call Clip. Do I care? If you were caught, it would have endangered me. You don't like me, do you? Bertuccat was a typical product of the Marseille streets, a brutish, dim-witted fool with little to commend him but the size of his fists and his fearlessness in a fight. I'll tell you what I do not like, the thought of being hanged because you are incompetent. You should have killed the man while you could, and had the Vintaine seek his killer. They are loyal to each other. You know that as well as me. Better to beat him up like the thieving bastard he is and leave him as if discovered while looting. This way we're safe. I wonder why. You're so worried about your skin? The vidame heard the sneer. Bertuccat was built massively, like a cathedral with a thick neck and a narrow head, as if squeezed into a helmet that was too small. His eyes were bovine, but bovine like an angry bull's. But Bertuccat was useful. His unthinking belligerence made the vidame feel safer. For now. What is your news? Have you heard about the Vintaine? What of it? They have been captured. Their ship was taken. And our friend? He was on board. Either he's dead or he's prisoner too, with our friends. Then we must hope he is not killed. It would take months to get another of his caliber. I could do his work. You! The vidame was so surprised he almost laughed. It had taken weeks to find his spy. Bertuccat could not appreciate what it was like living with the enemy all day long, showing friendship to men who infested the country like a plague. This was no game. He must have two personalities, two nationalities, two lives. One was that of an Englishman keen on plunder and slaughter, the other a loyal servant of King Philippe, seeking to thwart the English attempts to ravage poor France, but pretending to admire these murderers and pillagers. Only one man he had ever met could act the part convincingly. He had an innate conflict, a French mother, English father, a life spent partly in both camps. The vidame spy was perfect. He wore his Englishness like a cloak, to put on or take off at will. Bertuccat was a thug. He wouldn't last 2 minutes. No, the vidame had to pray that his spy was returned safe and well. Dunkirk. And so, my friends, here we soon must part, Chrétien said. Berenger and the others were held under the suspicious gaze of the heavily armed Genoese. In the crow's nest, 4 men with spanned crossbows kept a close watch, too. Not that Berenger or the others felt an urge to escape. There was no point. The galley's complement was 200 rowers and shipmen. Those were appalling odds for 30 survivors of the Vintaine and the ship's crew. Berenger said, "I am glad to have met you. You are a kindly captor." "And you, my friend, are a most gracious guest," Chrétien said. "I wish circumstances were better when we met. I would have enjoyed your company had we the time to meet over a mess of food. Perhaps we shall still have an opportunity to share a meal." "There's little to learn about me," Berenger said. "I am only a fighter in the king's host." "No, there is more to you than that," Chrétien said. "You have been trained in chivalry, that is clear." "I doubt we shall meet again," Berenger said reluctantly. "Nonsense. A good keeper will not begrudge us a conversation or two," Chrétien said heartily. He clapped Berenger on the back. "Look for me. I will visit you on the morrow. First I must see to my supplies and prepare the Sainte Marie. But I shall come, and we shall seek the best inn and share a meal and discuss our lives." "Fripp, what now?" Clip called. "We'll be taken to a jail," he said without turning. "The jail, eh? Well, you know what'll happen, don't you?" "Clip," Jack Fletcher called. "Aye?" "Don't say it. Just shut up." Chapter 5. Berenger had seen worse. This jail was large, dry, and with straw on the floor. 2 leather buckets were provided, and while it was not enough to cope with the needs of 30 men, at least the floor was kept clear at first. "What now, Fripp?" Jack asked. He squatted before his vintner. All about them men shuffled closer, Tyler, John of Essex, Clip, and the rest, squatting in an anxious semicircle. "There's nothing we can do at present," Berenger said. "We have to hope the French don't mistreat us." Clip chewed at a nail. The wizened, beggarly-featured man's silence was demonstrative of inner turmoil. His assertion that all would shortly die was an irritating fixture in the men's lives, and his curious silence was as shocking as the death rattle in a man's throat. "Lads, we'll get out of here," Berenger said with a certainty he didn't feel. "The French won't want to upset our king more than they have to." "Yes, Fripp," Jack said, and the men drifted away, none of them exchanging so much as a glance, selecting spaces to sit and think. Or pray. His hands had been clasped in his lap, and now he willed them apart but could not separate them. They were linked as though bound with invisible thongs. Looking about the chamber, he could see that his men and the shipmen all knew the reality. The English had been in France for weeks, trying to bring the French to battle by means of dampenum, They waged war, burning, raping, looting, and murdering to prove the French king's inability to honour his duty of protection towards his people. Tens of thousands had been robbed, ransomed, or slain since the English landed at Saint-Valaoug. Any Frenchman would want revenge. If the roles were reversed, if this were Portsmouth or Southampton and Frenchmen were captured, Berenger knew they would be tortured within an inch of their soul's release, allowed to recover, and then tortured again before finally being executed in front of a jeering crowd. And he expected exactly that. His hands shook with rising panic. He knew how the French executed people. He would be bound to the wheel. The executioner would break all Berenger's bones one by one. Metal brands would scorch and burn him. Pincers would flay him alive. The horror of a vengeful death with all its concomitant cruelty. John of Essex said quietly, "We can get out of this, Fripp." I am well," he managed. "Be calm. For them, Fripp. Be strong," John whispered. Berenger would have answered, but just then there was a rattle of bolts and the sound of a key in the lock, and the door swung open. Villeneuve-la-Hardi. Beatrice would never forget that day. She had helped the donkey see to the oxen, laughing with him and Georges, his new friend. Ed was keen to help, but kept getting under her feet, and when she showed her frustration, she was perplexed to see his expression. He did not seem resentful or bitter, but did have a curious reticence. Perhaps he thought he should have gone with the Vintaine? The morning did not improve. Beatrice wanted to hurry, but the donkey dawdled, looking at her askance every so often. And then, when she stood and stretched, she realized why. She turned to find him staring at her breasts. She felt the blood. She did not see Ed, only a man, one exhibiting the same lascivious desires of those who had tried to rape her. "What? You think yourself old enough to bet me?" she snapped. He coloured, spun around, and fled. Instantly she was struck with shame. Ed was no lustful man, but a child on the cusp of manhood, a boy confused about his urges. "Ed!" she called remorsefully. But it was too late. He was gone. Georges ran off in pursuit, while Beatrice stood, cursing her quick temper. She had made many mistakes in her life, but few as foolish as this. She should have been more careful. Perhaps Archibald was right. Maybe she should leave. Here she was a constant source of dissension. If she disturbed even poor Donkey, it might be better for her to leave. Archibald was seated before the fire. He scowled at the flames thoughtfully, nodding his head occasionally as if to some inner argument only he could hear. "Archibald! Archibald!" "What's the matter with the boy now?" Archibald grumbled as Donkey came pelting down the road, Georges close behind like a spaniel. "The Vintaine! They've been taken! All of them!" Chapter 6. Dunkirk. The captives were shoved and clubbed forward. Apart from Tyler yelping, there was little sound from the English, only the rattling of their chains. Dog Breath ignored every blow with the stoicism of a saint who can see heaven before him. Clip was struck with such ferocity that his legs crumbled, and Jack Fletcher and John of Essex had to grab an arm each, and, ducking from the blows aimed at them, hurry Clip forwards. He tried to pick his feet up, first one boot, then the other, but with the chain securing his ankles, he could not bring either foot forward far enough to take his weight, and at the speed with which they were propelling him, he could not move both together. Eventually he gave up and allowed his boots to drag in the dirt. They were taken to a broad hall. On the walls hung tapestries of biblical scenes, while to the left a vast unglazed window gave a view over the harbour itself. 2 tables were piled with parchments and scrolls, while an army of clerks scurried, busy as rats in a bakery. However, it was not their bustle that caught Berenger's attention. It was the 5 men before him. Two looked like well-fed merchants. One was a little under 5.5 feet tall, with pleasant features under mousy-coloured hair. He looked prone to laughter and conviviality, but he had the thick neck of a man used to wearing a steel helm. His shoulders, too, had the breadth of a man who wielded a lance. He was the one to watch. The second had pale brown hair and a flabby face. Though taller, he was no fighter. He had a paunch like a London banker, and his neck was thick only because of the rolls of fat. He fixed Berenger with a gimlet eye. He had the look of a man presented with the thief who had taken his purse. Apart from these two stood a cardinal with a face that smiled all the time, yet there was no answering smile in his eyes. He was the most dangerous of the three. The fourth was a sandy-haired, bearded man with a red complexion who stood watching the English with hatred, while the last was a soldier through and through, as short as the first merchant, but with thick, fair hair offsetting his square face. The first, more affable-looking man spoke. "These are the devils who wreaked such havoc. They look like drowned rats." "Silence, Jean de Vervin," the man-at-arms said. He eyed the prisoners without emotion. "I caught them in the channel," the Genoese said. He had followed behind them all and now stood at the side. When he caught Berenger's eye, he winked. "They look like the scum they are," the fourth man said. Berenger was startled to hear the Scottish accent. He had heard that Scots fought for the King of France, but he had never met one here before. "You are pirates," the man-at-arms began without delay. He spoke strongly accented French, and Berenger thought the dialect sounded familiar. Perhaps it was from near Calais. "You attacked our lawful traffic on the sea." "We're subjects of King Edward III, Berenger said in the same language. He ducked his head nervously. "We were guarding the king's fleet." "Only because your vessel was too feeble to withstand a fight," the man commented. The fellow called Jean de Vervin shook his head. "Count, is it not astonishing? These are the fabled archers who strike fear into the hearts of all France. They look like peasants." The cardinal spoke in a high, sing-song tone. "Perhaps these are new recruits who have yet to see battle, my lord." Jean de Vervin shook his head. "Look at their clothing, their faces. These are not recent comers to the fray. These have been living well on French soil for many months." "You think so?" "Yes, we should make use of them." "How could we make use of such as these?" the man-at-arms said with disdain. "As an example. Many believe these English possess the powers of the devil. Let us prove that these archers are merely peasants," Jean de Vervin said, his eyes lingering on dog-breath with revulsion. "Better! We should use them as an example to all who would seek to harm France," the merchant with the hard eyes said. "Put them to hard labor, improving our defenses. By their efforts, they can keep us secure." "At the expense of the guards necessary to watch over them," the man-at-arms commented. Bergerac had noticed that Jean de Vervin had called him Count. He wondered who this was. "No. Better that we throw them from walls. We have no need of extra mouths to feed, especially when those mouths require men to guard them." "You would not release them to continue their depredations?" Jean de Vervin declared, and his companion nodded briskly. "No, execute them all and throw their bodies from the walls. We do not wish them free. Kill them one at a time. A daily celebration. Start with that one," the merchant said, pointing at Berenger. Jean de Vervin shook his head. "Surely we should begin with a common archer and save the captain until last." The cardinal spoke in a calm, contemplative manner. "I think you should blind them and cut off the fingers they use to work their bows, then send them back. Perhaps allow one to keep an eye that he might lead them." The count drew his mouth into a thoughtful moue. "It may encourage other English to reconsider their actions." Chrétien de Grimaud took a pace forward. "I gave my word that these men would not be tortured or executed if they surrendered." "You spoke without authority," the man-at-arms said. My lord the Comte de Roussy, I would not wish it thought that I gave my word carelessly. Then be more careful with your words. Chrétien de Grimaud nodded. He didn't so much as glance in Berenger's direction. That was when Berenger knew they were lost. The cardinal nodded as the Genoese was stilled. I shall arrange for a platform to be constructed outside the church. The people can witness their punishment there. It will take a day or perhaps two to complete. Then we can turn them from the town's gate to wander where they will. Yes, the Comte de Roussy said, but we need to make an example for the townspeople so that they know we shall defend them against these English devils. We shall pick two for immediate illustration of our determination to punish all English invaders. My lords, Jean de Vervins said, surely you should wait until the king has heard the Genoese request. It will not harm your case to offer a period for reflection. Then, when the king has made known his view, you can be assured of not going against his will. These peasants are my prisoners to do with as I will. I would not delay their execution even if they were lords and eligible for ransom. No, I will see them die and let all the English know that this is what they can expect. Berenger felt a flash of anger on hearing this and tried to step forward, but a lance butt struck his belly, and he fell back, gasping. He clutched his belly, glaring at the guard who had hit him. He had an urge to spring and hit the man, but before he could, a pair of men behind him had set their swords to him. Him, the man-at-arms said, languidly indicating the young, fair-haired sailor who had wept to see his ship sink, and another, older mariner. The two were separated from the rest by lances and clubs. These we shall hang now. Take the rest to the dungeon. We shall see to them later. The younger shipman began to wail as he saw the others being led back the way they had come. But Berenger had no time for his panic. His own mind was working. There must be some way they could escape. Villeneuve-la-Radie. Beatrice felt as though the core of her inner being had fractured. A painful, stabbing pain afflicted her just below her rib-cage, as though pins worked their way through her flesh. Did none escape? They were all taken. Some were slain, Ed said. I don't know who. What will they do? Beatrice asked Archibald. He grimaced. What would any leader do? Hack off their heads so they're less of a risk. Or he might mutilate them so that they can live forever as a reminder of French revenge, Archibald said heavily. No, you don't think they would do that? Beatrice felt her body convulsing. A horrible emptiness affected her belly. To think that Berenger could be dead or scarred for life was appalling. Archibald looked at her. His face was torn by grief. I know it's foul, maid, but that's the way of things. God willing, they will return. If they don't, he chose to punish them, and we will need to say prayers for them. But there is nothing more we can do. You are a callous old man, she said, and turned and ran from his camp, leaving Archibald surprised and Ed gaping. Weeping, Beatrice ran along the road towards the town and then out to the English harbour. There was a constant shouting, the rumble of great rocks being rolled into the slings of the vast wooden siege machines, and the occasional slither and crack as an engine was released, the vast weight of the counterbalance jerking downwards, sending the arm high into the air, and the rock flying, freed from its sling, to hurtle through the sky and pound at the walls or buildings of the town. She had no idea where she was going. Her feet bore her away from the harbour and the ships and out towards the west, where the heights of Sangat loomed. The road took her over a little bridge and past the marshes reeking of putrefying vegetation. This land had the advantage that there was nowhere that would permit an army to pass other than the two roads, one heading south, the other holding to the coast. Waves crashed at the shore to her right, and she stared out to sea again, wondering what had happened to Berenger and his men. Approaching hooves stirred her from her reverie in time to see a small company of horsemen under a knight. She looked up into a face that could have been carved from the same stone as the walls protecting Calais. He wore a cold, grim, careless expression. It was the face of a man who could happily exterminate a race, if there were profit in it. Only a few weeks ago she had felt the same. She could have seen all her countrymen executed for the death of her father, for the way that she had herself been harried. Yet now she was coming to feel sympathy for the people. They struggled and strove like others, but they were forced to suffer the depredations of men such as this, a knight with no compassion in his soul. She had seen him before, Sir Peter of Bromley, once Sir Pierre d'Agen, a knight banneret in the pay of the king. Once he had been the most honoured knight in the service of King Philippe. But after falling out of favour, he came to serve the English. He glanced at her, and as his eyes raked her body, she shuddered with revulsion. It was like being licked by snakes. She was tempted to keep walking, to leave this camp, as Archibald had intimated. But if she were to leave, where could she go? Nowhere. She had no friends, no family, no nation. Chapter 7. Dunkirk. Berenger would never forget the man's screams as he was dragged away. His companion uttered a few choice curses, mentioning the parentage of the man-at-arms and others, but he could at least walk. The other was beshitten before he was out of the door.
"I swore that these men and those sailors would be safe,"
Chrétien de Grimaud said. His voice was quiet, but Berenger could hear the anger. "You exceeded your authority, then," the Comte de Roussy said flatly. "These are pirates, and will be treated as such." The cardinal chuckled. "If you are nervous about what they might think of your honour, do not. They will soon have other matters to occupy them." As he spoke, Berenger saw Jean de Vervin's eyes pass over the prisoners. When they turned to him, Berenger felt an overwhelming hatred and loathing fill him. There was no feeling in the Frenchman's eyes, he thought. He might have been peering at a turd on the street. And then there was a flicker. It was tiny, a twitch almost, and yet Berenger could have sworn that there was a movement of his eyelid, as though he was winking at him. The moment passed. Jean de Vervin's gaze passed on, and Berenger was left bewildered, wondering whether he had imagined it. Chrétien de Grimaud laughed lightly. "So, you say my promise will be ignored, then? That is good. A man should know how he stands. You are happy to dishonour me?" "Your honour is your concern," the Count said. He stared at the shipman, his voice sinking to a malevolent hiss.
"If you Genoese had fought better at Crécy, perhaps we would not now be fighting the English. We would have driven them all into the sea. The courage of your compatriots has left us in this condition. These English archers are only alive because of them." "My compatriots fought bravely until they were slaughtered by fools who knew little about warfare," Chrétien de Grimaud said tightly. "They could not fight the English because their bowstrings were sodden by rain. Their boats could not reach the English, while the English were killing them with showers of arrows. And their reward? Your knights trampled their bodies into the mud." The Count snapped angrily. "You dare speak of them in the same breath as our brave knights? I should teach you the meaning of honour and dignity." "I would be happy to comply. My brave Genoese metal can show you the meaning of—" "Enough, Count! Master Grimaud, this matter is closed," the Cardinal snapped. "That battle is over, and there's nothing we can do to bring back the poor souls lost. Take these prisoners away. We shall see to them when we have erected a stage on which to punish them." Berenger and the others found themselves shoved unceremoniously towards the door through which the two sailors had recently been taken. It led to a staircase of stone and down to a paved yard. They were forced towards a gateway in the encircling wall. From here they could see the church, and before it a large tree. There they saw a man throwing ropes into the branches, where a boy caught them and passed them over two limbs,
letting the ends fall to the ground. The young sailor was gibbering, pleading with his hands clasped, while his companion glared at him with contempt. As Berenger and the others approached, their guards stopped so that they could enjoy the spectacle. Ignoring the weeping, petrified sailor, men grabbed the other man and set the rope about his throat. Then, hauling on the other end of the rope, 4 men hauled him up into the air. His legs kicking wildly, eyes wide, mouth gaping, the sailor slowly throttled, trying with every jerk and lunge of his legs to snap his own neck and bring about a quicker end. He was still thrashing ever more feebly as the French, laughing, tied the second rope about the kneeling man and lifted him still higher, laughing and running as the man's legs flicked ordure over the crowds with each spasmodic kick. From the gleeful response of the crowds, Berenger knew he could expect nothing better when it was his turn to be blinded and crippled. There would be no sympathy here for men who had inspired so much fear and loathing throughout France. A blow in the small of his back almost drove him to his knees, but he stumbled onwards, his thoughts directed at escape.
"Not here, my friend."
He looked around and found himself staring at Jean de Vervin. "What?"
"You will have no easy escape here."
Berenger had the unpleasant certainty that this man had read his mind.
"Who are you?" "Me, a mere country-living knight, used to life far from the king's court," Jean de Vervin said with a quiet melancholy. "I am nothing. But you think you can drive a path through all these guards? No, I think you will need more than that. You will need a miracle, yes?"
Jean smiled sadly, turned, and was gone.
"Yes," Berenger said to himself. "Just a fucking miracle."
Villeneuve-la-Hardi. Sir John de Sully was resting when the Genoese appeared. Like his archers, the knight had no chair, only a worn 3-legged stool filched from a house.
"Well,"
he demanded as Archibald entered.
"Sir, have you heard about the Vintaine?"
Whereas many knights were uninterested in their men, the banneret had shown himself keen to see to their interests during the campaign. His hair may be grizzled now, but his eyes were as clear as when he sat on his mount at Bannockburn and witnessed the disaster 30 and more years ago. That slaughter had affected him, and since then he had made every effort to protect his men.
"What of them?"
Archibald told him the news of Berenger and his men. He knew Sir John would be upset to hear of losing so many, but the knight's rage surprised even him.
"Damn those pirates, black souls to hell!"
Sir John swore. He kicked his stool away and ran his fingers through his hair bitterly.
"Fripper is one of our most competent vintners. Christ's bones, but we could do with more like him. You are sure of this?"
"Another ship saw them captured by a galley that rammed them." The knight clenched his fist and was about to speak when his esquire appeared. "Sir, I was aroused by the commotion."
"Aye, I dare say you were, Richard. Have you heard about the men and Fripper?"
"That they have been captured, yes." Richard Berenger had been Sir John's esquire for 6 years, a dependable, resilient, calm fellow with a Norman's face and bearing, but without the arrogance.
"It's the worst news,"
Sir John said, and when Richard retrieved the stool, he sat down heavily.
"Fripper was a good man."
"There is no hope of rescue?" Richard said.
"The devil only knows where they'll have been taken. In a galley, they could be in any of the river mouths along the coast here. We could not tell where to go. It's futile."
"If lucky, their end will be quick," Archibald said.
"Yes,"
Sir John agreed, glowering.
"I would it were another Vintaine, though."
Archibald nodded, standing quietly until the knight glanced up.
"Well, Genoese, is there more bad news you wish to impart?"
"Sir John, I think I may be able to help with the reduction of the town." He had the knight's attention.
"How so?"
Richard Berenger had brought a roasted capon. Sir John took a leg, but his eyes never left the Genoese. The enthusiasm and excitement in Archibald's face was palpable.
"We are stuck here. The town has denied us the harbour, and their ships can resupply the town. There's little we can do about that. We cannot reach the north of the town to command the harbour because of their men on the Rhys bank.
and we can't use scaling ladders because of the moat.
So?
We need to prevent their ships from getting to the town.
No one will disagree with that. You may not have noticed, but we've been attempting to do just that,
Sir John said sarcastically. In fact, we have just lost Fripper trying to protect our ships. But if we keep ships to blockade the harbour and also position weapons to sink any that pass the harbour mouth, we will be able to stop supplies from reaching the town. No supplies means no ability to fight. We can starve them.
What sort of weapon would you place at the harbour mouth?
We have nothing here at—
You waste my time!
I was going to say, but I do have one at home. A great beast that would sweep any ship from the sea. If you can arrange for its transport, I will do the rest. Sir John dropped the bones on his plate and studied the eager Genoese. He knew